Let's take a moment just to get quiet and recentered and focus back to what we're doing after the break. Loving God, thank you for this time together, for these beautiful men. Please enter our hearts and help us have a new experience and set aside all of our old ideas to a new experience with you. Amen.
Amen.
All right. This is going to be rapid fire. Well, we got a lot of questions. They don't have to be rapid fire. Forgot who I was talking to. How do you put the cardboard cutout away and start showing up in AA? How do you get to be more authentic is the question.
I buy nice clothes.
What if you can't afford them?
Yeah. The being authentic. I mean, it's the same thing about getting your integrity back. It's what the program brings us. The ego is what is the artifice in that thing, and it's your love with your identity of who you think you are. And again, you can't get rid of it, but you can make it a junior partner. I think the question would indicate that you're aware that you're doing that, and that's the key to all of it. I mean, so many times we've been doing that for a long, long time and are unaware of it. We think it's normal. Just pay, the primary thing we're listening to is our internal dialogue. Why the hell not? I mean, it looks like I, have all the information. And doesn't work. Yes.
So my initial thought when the question was asked is we think we're being authentic. I come in here and I can see what I can see, and I can't see what I can't see. And the important stuff is the big stuff that I can. But the journey here is understanding who and what I really am, and it took time. So when we talk about authenticity, Alcoholics Anonymous meets you right where you are. It doesn't care if you're lying to us. A good sponsor and a journey through the steps and a service commitment at your home group will start breaking that barrier down. And if you go through the steps and you have the same experience I had, when I say that, I know it's personal to you, and it's available to you. And the good thing is that it didn't matter if I was authentic. I became who I am today as a result of going through the steps.
Awesome. In most steps, there's a prayer involved. How does prayer fit into the process? Would the end game be the same without the prayer?
See the first part?
The first part is acknowledging that prayer is involved in most of the steps. Would the end game be the same without the prayer?
I find myself, when I wrestle with certain things, if I'm not really ready to make it a serious piece of business, I can't pray about it. It seems inauthentic, to address that. And so that would be one of the indications I would say to you that, your ability or inability to pray about it would indicate how serious you are. The process of change is elevating these things from complaints to a piece of business. And I think everybody in the room generally knows the difference between those two things.
You want to add something, Jack?
No.
All right. You start this one then, Jack. What do you make of what do you ask of the relationship with the men you sponsor between a brand new guy, a 5-year guy, and a new sponsee with long-term sobriety? How do you treat those guys differently? Or do you?
Is that someone's stomach, for Christ's sake? Oh, someone who went to the barbecue for sure.
So when I used to parrot it in meetings. I'd say that I sponsor all the guys the same. And it's an easy thing to say until you sponsor a bunch of guys. I do not sponsor all the guys the same. You know, we have a conversation in the beginning that talks about the terms of the relationship. This is what we're going to do, you know, and that conversation is generally the same. You know, we're going to be doing Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, I don't want you to call me every day unless you need to call me every day. You know, I don't know. I want you to call me regularly. You know, those types of things are the things we discuss in the beginning, but then we get to know each other. We go and have a cup of coffee, and I tell the guy a little bit of my story. I have them tell me, I always tell them, give me your 5-minute story. It's always longer than that, you know, and I find out where you are. You know, there's some guys that come to me and they're rock solid and they're having difficulty with prayer and meditation. You know, we're going to take a look at steps 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to ask them who they're working with. Do you have guys actively in the work? If you're going through the work with other guys, we're going to start a conversation about a spiritual discipline. You know, so I don't know where people are at, but I try to find out. You know, I try to find out where they're at, and so it's different with every guy. The other thing is that not every guy responds the same way to the same thing. I didn't, you know. I wasn't that guy. You know, I give them what I've got, and I give them what my experience has taught me to go. But I want to be as effective as possible. Sometimes that's a little different approach with some guys. Some guys are so wounded when they come in here, they just need to be loved and taken to a meeting. You know, other guys have been dicking around with the steps for so long, they need to get into the work and into the book and understand this is about doing this work. So it's always different.
Same? Bob? I want to honor the traditions, but what do I do about coming back to AA after I've relapsed on drugs after long-term sobriety?
I don't think anything's different. You know, recovery is, you know, sobriety is absence of anything that affects us from the neck up. I don't see the difference. People who don't belong in AA don't stay.
We can't even keep the ones that belong.
Exactly right.
You know, I don't, you know, in the old days back when that chemical dependency was kind of an issue and everybody was talking about who belongs and who doesn't belong, I really think we received the person who had a relapse back with open arms, as we should. And so.
Little history question. Where did the 12 steps originate from or out of?
Depends on who you talk to. Who wrote was it Bill Borchard? No. Who wrote the book, The Writing of the Big Book? Bill Shaber. He makes it sound like we didn't have steps prior to Bill Wilson's writing of the steps, which is nonsense. Bill himself wrote out that, you know, that famous little 5-point deal, and the Oxford group had, you know, Dr. Bob would take the person through on, you know, on the 5th or 6th day before they let the person out and take them through what were those original steps. What's astounding to me, so the writing of the book, if you read that, it's a fantastic, you know, 2 of the great history books are Not God and, you know, Shaber's book. Bill Wilson wrote the chapter 5 and chapter 6 in December of 1938. Now, there had been a lot of writing and a lot of putting things together, but I mean, he literally wrote the entire program in that part. When you talk about something coming through someone, it is just extraordinary. And then the change that they made in the manuscript from the you to we, you know, those, I mean, there are just so many unbelievably important things. I just, the grace that we were left with what they brought to us and what they left out. You know, they were 2 men that, you know, had deep feelings of thought and spirituality, but they were concerned about religion. And they didn't, you know, if we didn't have God as you understand him in those steps, I mean, we wouldn't have a fellowship today. We'd be tearing ourselves apart. It is extraordinary. So Bill, wrote those steps in a fit of depression, took the 5 points and expanded them into 12. And I don't know whether that, I don't think that coincided with his writing of those 2 chapters, but it came through Bill, for sure.
Awesome. Jack, do you want to add to that?
Nope.
Well, I want to follow up on that question. So you know the story when Ed Dowling goes and visits Bill for the first time in the St. Louis clubhouse, and because he's amazed how close they are. Was it the 12 Episcopalian experiences, or?
No, with the spiritual practices of Ignatia, the Jesuit practices of
Got it.
Ignatia. And as you find out, I mean, the traditions of most of the great spiritual and religious traditions of the world have such unbelievable similarity. I mean, you're reading it, you say, oh, they took that from AA. No.
Yes, they did.
Probably not.
Traditions questions for you, Jack. I'm hearing this a lot at meetings during the 7th tradition. We need you more than your money. Do you have an opinion on that?
Oh, my God. Yeah, but I could talk for the next 3 hours about this.
You get 5 minutes.
I got news for you. We need your money. And we do. We're self-supporting. When we talk about money in Alcoholics Anonymous, we pay our way. That's our job. We pay a high price to get in here, but once we're in here, who's going to pay our way? It's like there's a cost to be here this weekend because we pay our way. So yeah, we need your money. And, there's a lot going on in Alcoholics Anonymous right now around finances because we're broke. And you can I'll have conversations with you till I'm blue in the face, but here's the deal. We're the owners. We own this thing. This is ours. Bill and Bob gave it to us. We got to pay our way. I've been all over the country. I get invited to do traditions talks and concept talks, and I understand what's going on because I'm informed about it. I have people in my life that help me stay informed about the finances in Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole. I know what's going on in my home group. There was a period of time where my wife said to me, she said, I want you to get the mail. I never got the mail. I was too busy out making money. And she said, I want you to open the mail. I want you to understand what our bills look like. I want you to understand what our bank statements look like. And I started getting the mail. And I started understanding where our finances were. I started understanding. She wasn't joking. We needed to pay attention to it. And everything changed because I was informed. And if you don't know what's going on in Alcoholics Anonymous with our finances, get informed. And if you want to talk to me about it, I will inform you. And I'll also tell you how to get the information and get our quarterly reports. And right now, it's a critical time because we're broke. We've spent a lot of our ample reserve. And there's a reason for that. And you may sit in your home group and talk about not supporting GSO, the General Service Office, because they're broke. When I walked in here, I had burned my life financially to the ground. I still had to pay my way. As I rebuilt it, as I came up with a new ideal, I had to pay my way. Same thing here. We're going to have some hard decisions to make with Alcoholics Anonymous over the next 5 to 10 years. We got to pay our way as we go through it, not hold our money at our home group. We need to pay our way.
And because of COVID and because of the way the world is today, Alcoholics Anonymous depend for about half its income on publication. Today, people are not buying books, not with the same degree that they were before. Maybe they're buying them online. We have to figure out, and it's going to be a very interesting and I think not easy transition, how to reach the members of Alcoholics Anonymous. We're a moving crap game. It's a tough thing to do. And a lot of groups are not set up to be registered or give. And so it's important that, to some extent, you take some responsibility to find out if your group is making those contributions. Our reserves are down to about 5 months, and we're running negative, and there's going to be, I think there has to be a very large change. Somehow they've got to start a way to connect with individual members in order to get the long-range support that they deserve and need, we deserve and need.
Thanks. A concept question. What's your experience incorporating Concept 9 into business? And I'll just refresh the audience what Concept 9 is. Good service leadership at all levels is indispensable for the future safety and functioning of AA. AA leaders must lead by example, serving rather than governing. So how do you tie your business affairs into that?
You spend more time trying to figure out who's going to cut your hair than who's going to be your GSR. You spend more time trying to figure out who should work on your truck than who's going to be your next delegate. And I say you, including me. You know, when was the last time you sat in a group conscience and somebody raised their hand or got their hand raised for them to be your GSR? Because they're a warm suit. You know, we should be putting people out there that are qualified for the job, that have an experience with this thing, that they're willing to go to bat for. You know, when we talk about the seventh tradition, and then this question is wonderful. The name of my company, I have two companies. One of them's named Concept One Group. The other one's named the Home Group. Because it's applicable to everything I do. And I need to be reminded about that. How does Concept 9 fit in? When you go out and hire somebody in your business, do you hire the best possible person? Or do you go hire your buddy? Or do you just put a warm suit in the chair? That's how it's our job to put the right people forward. And we got some big decisions to make in Alcoholics Anonymous. Every publishing company in the world over the last 10 years has redefined itself. Every single one. We have 2 publishing companies. We haven't changed them in a long time. We need to evaluate what a realistic business plan looks like for 2 publishing companies for the next 50 years. It's going to be different than it is right now.
One's AAWS and one's a Grapevine.
Yes. And it's we have to do that. We need to be putting the best possible people out there to talk to represent our groups in the general service structure. They need to be informed. I want guys with some skin in the game when I hire people in my business. You know, I want guys that have seasoned, that have had some experience in construction. And it's got to be the same way inside Alcoholics Anonymous right now. And, you know, I'm not joking when I tell you that I've seen it happen, that I spend more time deciding who's going to cut my hair than I do who's going to be my GSR. Your GSR could be the next delegate. And there's no us and them. It's just us.
Bob?
No.
Nope. Here's an easy one. How, when, why did you decide she is the one?
So first of all, I fell in love with my wife when I was, 22 years old, I guess. She was up from Chicago going to St. Catherine's College, now St. Catherine's University. I walked out of Notre Dame middle of my senior year, and my cousin fixed me up with Linda. And that was it. And that's something that you kind of go in and out of. I mean, so my blessing is I live in a Catholic ghetto. I mean, guys, we all got married. All of us got married in about a 1.5 year period of time. That was the time where, if you're at college, that happened. Then you start having kids and you do that. The worldly clamors will just take you away from that. I don't know where I got the idea. I think from my parents. My parents had 7 children. But they took care of each other. They took vacations. They went on trips. They had a wonderful social life. And I find today that there are all sorts of people. I got a guy that's not in AA that I'm kind of spending time almost sponsoring, whose wife, I fixed him up. I was in an AA meeting, and I walked up to this young woman, and I said, this is going to sound really weird, but I got a guy that I'd like to give him your telephone number. And he was the golf pro at our club. And there are two of the, they were really, it was very cool. And now they're divorced. And, yeah. No, but they, and two wonderful kids, and they're two great people, and she's a great member of Alcoholics Anonymous. That happened. He was an unbelievably responsible father and provider. And he did not, in my mind, take care of the relationship and the romance in the relationship. It always, and that's the tendency as your life starts, when if you've got kids and a job and you're up to your ass in alligators. It is, but I'm telling you, if you really take care of your spouse, I mean, it is sexually, romantically, treat her like your next girlfriend. I mean, what you do, if you burn through a relationship, I mean, when you go to start that new relationship or find someone, you're very attentive. And we don't do that with the one that's at home with us. And and if you have that pattern of having romance and having, and take the time for each other, and it's vitally important that's your greatest gift to your children is the love that you and your wife have. It's the greatest example they will ever have. Wow. They know you're not perfect, but I'm telling you, if you take care of each other, they're going to learn that. If you don't take care of each other, and there are families that don't treat women well, that women are second-class citizens. In my family, if you wanted to get your ass kicked, give your mother a bad time. That was not workable, and it was not okay, and it's the same thing with your sisters. Women were honored in their family, and I had the blessing of having that.
I've been with my wife since I was 16 and she was 14, or 15 and 13, I don't remember which. We met in high school, and we've been together since then, and there were 6 months off for bad behavior, mine, not hers. And she's an active member of Al-Anon, and I can tell you that when she shares, she talks about it like she says there's been several different marriages during that marriage. Wow. And that's true. We got to grow together, we got to grow apart, and then back together again. It's been a journey. I can remember a number of years ago, I called Bob and he said, how are you and Steph doing? And I said, it's perfect. It's easy, it's nice, and we're in love, And he said, isn't it nice that at some point we just stop critiquing each other? And I'd never heard it phrased like that. But that's exactly what happened. We're just in it. We're just there. We enjoy each other. And when did I know she was the one? A long time ago. But it's easy to say that. And I can tell you that there's times where we didn't get divorced because we were both too tired to get divorced. It was just exhausting. Raising kids and doing the things we do and trying to figure out how to have a relationship and what we needed to do in the relationship. But we just kept moving forward. We just kept taking the next indicated action. And through all that, we developed this experience and this trust for each other that is just it is just unbelievable.
And that's what those Texans gave us too. I mean, they had a lot of, what are they called? Not just house meetings, but
couples meetings. Chapter 9 meetings.
And more in Texas than I've seen in any other place in the country. And they were just attractive. And they took care of each other. And they loved each other. I mean, they were great examples.
My wife and I do that now. We have a couples meeting that we do once a month. We've been doing it for years. Tim and his wife have been doing it with us. And we bring the traditions in, we bring the concepts in, we bring the steps in, It's Al-Anon, it's AA, it's just these couples that are walking the path together. And we share our experience with what that looks like. And it is attractive, and it's fun, and it's nice, and all of those things, but, Bob said it, you got to pay attention to it. Whatever I pay attention to comes back to me 1,000-fold. And it is nice.
I almost skipped that question. I'm glad I didn't. If you've earnestly taken the third step prayer and you still have opinions on how your life should go, does that make you a fake in recovery?
Hell no. I mean, opinions are like rectums. Everybody has one. I mean, it is, you're not going to change being human, but you get to a point where you're not impressed with your own opinions. You get tired of it. I mean, a lot of them, if you're paying attention, your opinions are often off kilter and don't work and all that sort of stuff. And you start to question your own thinking. If you don't start questioning your own thinking, you end up being very critical, and you end up being a critic. You end up in the stands taking a look at what other people are doing and how they're doing it, and all of a sudden you're not in action. You're being right and you're being judgmental, and that is not a good place to be.
I don't think it's possible to maintain that place of understanding God's got this whole thing all the time. And I say that because I haven't given it all. What are you going to put on the plate? We talk about the second surrender around here. I got news for you. It's not just been two. And that's that part, that time in my life where I realized I've been holding on to this piece. Bob said it in the opening thing, that we throw a piece of the towel back in, piece at a time. That's been my experience here. I don't even know I should have it on the plate, put it all on the plate. I thought I did, but if you look back over your sobriety, somebody asks you how you're doing at 5 years, you're going to tell them I'm doing great, I'm killing it, man. And then you ask the same question again at 10 years, and you're like, yeah, I didn't know what I know then, now. I had no idea. So how can we give it all to God? It's this practice of staying connected, staying unblocked, staying open to the conversation, because we don't even know what we don't know until we know.
But it gets easier. It gets easier when you just want to do the next right thing, when you want to be a good man. It's not complicated. We know how to do that. And but when we get lost, the ego takes over, and it's not pretty.
At what point are you enabling a sponsee who is dragging their feet?
You can't really determine that. I mean, you're not in charge of that. You can support what's going on, and all of us have sponsees that are not in the game at this particular moment. One of the things I've seen, people ask me, am I worried about AA? I say, no. They say, why? And I said, where else are you going to go? Where else do they have this? Number one. Number two, what we have are the directions to have a life. And it is, and I see people who were very pedestrian members of Alcoholics Anonymous that are sober 25 years now, and all of a sudden they're maybe retired, and all of a sudden they're working with people. They go through the book with someone who's got 10 years, and they're doing 12-step work that they didn't do earlier on in their lives when they were doing it. I mean, the example of taking people through the book, is so endemic in our society today that it's making wonderful changes in our program, and I think people kind of understand it. They see that as a path for themselves and go do that. I don't know. It's really hard. When you sponsor a lot of people, there's 3 or 4 of them that you get enormously close to with a lot of affection, and, the relationship is very special. And then there are others where it's more academic. People's ability and willingness to practice the program varies all over the map. And it doesn't, as I say, when you listen to someone like Jack, thank God I don't have to be Jack. I'm around people that are better members of Alcoholics Anonymous than I am. But you find your own place and your own way in doing that. You do not need to be someone else. You do not need to sponsor 13 guys or 25 guys. But sponsor 1 or 2. You just need to be in the game and be a player. That's all you need to do. And over a period of time, there'll be periods of time where you do more, and there'll be periods of time when you do less. And there are going to be dry periods. I mean, that is the thing that is the hardest thing in the world, when all of a sudden it's dry. And I find today that more and more people are going back and having someone take them through the book, get a sponsee, get a 12-step, start going someplace that you don't want to end up, and, put on a meeting. I mean, start doing something that you're not doing right now that's different, and you can't kill it ahead of time.
I have sponsored hundreds of guys, and this question comes up all the time. And we think about it and fuck with it, and it's excruciating. What do I do with this guy? Because you can't get him to do what you think he needs to do. Should I fire him? I can tell you that in my time in Alcoholics Anonymous, I have fired 1 sponsee, and it was very clear to me that it had to happen. I told him, you're sponsoring yourself. When you want a sponsor outside of yourself, call me. Keep my phone number. And that's it. You would think that we have to deal with it all the time. They deal with it. It's excruciating, and I'm trying to figure it out. How do I drag this guy along? He's gone. He's not doing what I ask him to do. He's not calling me. He's not showing up at the home group. He's already gone, and I'm thinking I got to do something about it. It takes care of itself. And it's funny because that guy that I told, he was sponsoring himself. It was clear. And it was a game to him, and that's why I did what I did. And he called me last night. We'll see where that goes. But the reality is that we make trouble where there's no trouble. The guy that you're concerned about is already gone, or he's already doing something different. Why do I need to worry about it? And when it gets like that, it starts becoming, they don't return phone calls. I tell them point blank, I'll be at my home group Tuesday night. Come there. I'm not going to come meet you anywhere. Come to my home group. And if they show up, great.
How would you ask somebody for spiritual consent besides your sponsor?
Yeah,
How would you ask someone for spiritual consent?
By asking them. If you find someone who's a seeker, that you see is reading books that you're not reading, that seems to have something you like, and you want to have a more specific conversation than, say, and I want to have just the AA conversation or the book conversation. I want to be able to talk about my spiritual walk, and ask them. You're gonna find those people in the rooms. They're going to attract you. And it is, I think, it is not in conflict with your sponsor relationship. It should be an add. Yes.
I was sitting with a guy after lunch, during the break, and he said it. He said, do I have spiritual consent? I said, yes, you do. Do I have spiritual consent with you? It was that easy, And the first time I did it, it sounds so goddamn corny. It does. It's like going up to somebody and say, hey, you want to be friends? But it's a powerful thing. It is a powerful thing to sit with another man and give each other permission to speak into your life. Try it.
Did that originate, that idea from Charlie? I mean, I know you can't speak for Charlie, but did that originate out of Steel on Steel?
I think that had something to do with it. Mark was big on steel on steel.
Yeah.
He, iron sharpens iron. And, I don't know the exact history, but it came from Mark, and that was a big part of who Mark was.
Well, Bill had spiritual guides.
Yes.
That's not new.
We get hung up with language around here. We do. And sometimes it's unfortunate, especially when we're dealing with guys that are new and don't know our language, and have never been on a spiritual journey, So don't let that hang you up. Don't let it hang you up. We all know what we're talking about. Yes, I want you to speak into my life. Yes, I want to speak into your life.
Awesome. How have you taken sponsees through resentment work against people who have caused them real harm, like physical or sexual abuse, especially the fourth column, or the last column? Sorry, you've got 6. The last column. I did not mean it like that. That last column work, where are we at fault?
So I've actually done this with some people. I shared with you that I was raised with an iron fist. And what I'm here to tell you is we say there's no victims, only volunteers. That's not true. It's not true. There are some victims. There's some people that have had some things happen to them that they didn't have any part of, and it happened to them. And when I get somebody that's wounded in that fashion, I do what the book tells me. I ask them to agree to go get some help from a professional in that area before we move into other things. Get them in a safe and comfortable place. And I'm not a doctor, man. I'm not a psychologist. I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. But when those things come up, they'll take you out. How you wear it will take you out. And there are some victims here. There's an appropriate response to that. There is. And as an alcoholic, I take those things farther than they should. So I have to help somebody lay it down. I have to help somebody put me back on firm ground with things and let me heal. And when I'm healed, then all of a sudden I have the ability to walk into an amends process, a forgiveness process, whatever it is.
And it is not just the event that happened to us that causes the problem. It is what we have added to it and how we have incorporated it into our lives. If you take 10 people that have experienced abuse, there's going to be a bell curve of how they respond to it and how they react to it and how much energy that it still has into their life today. And the message that I try to have in those situations is it is not necessary that you are continuing to cause angst and anxiety in your life because of something that happened 10 years ago or 25 years ago. There is a way through this. I'm not trying to diminish in any way the importance of it and the trauma of it, but it is important to know that you are not alone, that you can bring God into that, and you can bring the principles of the steps into it, and you can be free of it. The whole process of life is taking the rocks out of the creek. If we keep that stuff in our subconscious, it keeps coming up and creating considerable trauma in our lives. That is unnecessary. And it, with some of these more serious things, you do need professional help. But in many ways, half the people in this room have dealt with some significant trauma in their lives. And it's amazing what people have digested through the program. Pass.
Give us your definition of love.
Love. You know, it's funny that you said that, because I'm reading a book right now, and it says,
Really?
yeah, and it talks about the undefinable. It talks about, we talk around shit, you know. Tell me your definition of God, you know. I don't even have one. You know, I tell you my experience of God. I can tell you my experience of love. I can tell you those things, you know, and you would understand exactly what I'm talking about when I share those things. We've done it here this weekend. And, you know, it's that type of thing. And it has grown. It has changed over the years, you know, and it is just love. And
The first principle of life is love. As I say, at the Big Bang, all there was God. That, you know, most of us think of the first manifestation of God. You know, if you're a Christian, you think of, you know, Christ coming down. God has been manifesting himself in the universe since time immemorial, and it is everywhere. It is the spirit that enlivens our souls. It is the mind which enlivens our body. You know, we're sharing the mind and the spirit of God. And when we are in that place, when we are connected, and to the extent we are connected, we're lovers. I mean, it is this a movement that we are involved in is a movement towards love. Period. And it's of God. It's indefinable. Words cannot contain. You can point to it, and you can talk about it, and it's vitally important. But it's experiential.
Thanks. We've had singular questions on a lot of different steps and traditions and stuff. I don't think it's a mistake that we have 5 amends questions, you know, apropos to what you were saying earlier about the most important things that we do here. And I was going to combine them, but I want to take the time to do them each individually. Can you explain the amends process for people who can't or won't be seen?
yeah, I can tell you that so I'm going to tell you what the book says when they can't be seen. It says we write them a letter. You know, and I've done that. I can't tell you how many times I've had to do it myself, and I can't tell you how many times I've recommended it to guys I sponsor. It says if you can't see someone, we write them a letter. You know, and that comes in all different shapes. You know, sometimes it's the guy lives across the street, but he won't see you. You've tried to make the approach 10 times, and he's not interested. You know, somebody dies, and before you got to take care of that piece of business, you know, it's the guy that I can tell you that in this room there's guys where they've tried to make amends to their father time and time again, and there's been no result that's of any substantial value. You know, what do you do when that happens? You know, we forgive. Bob said it 3 times already this weekend. You know, we have 2 things we can do when we're hooked, and that's amend or forgive. And the book tells us that, you know. But I'm so mind-bound that I want to think of something else. I want to do something different. In fact, I know that the letter won't work, so I don't do that. And I spend the next 3 years trying to figure out what it is I should do while being an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Try writing a letter. That's what I would say. I tell the guys, write the letter this week and come back and see me with the letter next week. You know? And I can tell you it's worked. You know, sometimes it just gives us a direction to go in the forgiveness journey. Other times it gives us a direction to go with some specific amends. You know, but I trust this process that much. You know, it also tells us to ask God. You know, you ever done that? What do I do now? That's a great prayer. You know, and you know, I'll ask it once, and if I don't get the lightning bolt, fuck that. Back to my mind. You know, and the reality is ask again. You know, go be helpful to someone else. And I can't tell you how many times I had no idea how to make an amends, and I'm sitting in one of these things and somebody shares the exact thing that happened and how they got through it. Are you open to it? You know, are you showing up for this thing?
And sometimes we pay attention to the impossible so that it disempowers what is possible. Do what you can.
How do you make direct amends if your father is living on the streets, drinking and drugging?
I don't know. It's it is a disease. And I think to the extent, it's always amazing to me that we are often so judgmental about people who have the disease that are not able to get well. And you'd think that we would, you know, that we would be the last people to be judgmental about that process. And it's one of the most difficult things in the world. We're talking about the primary relationship. When your primary relationships are flawed, we think that it doesn't affect the rest of our lives, and that's nonsense. It is so important to us, to the extent possible, to repair and establish, and maybe reestablish the primary relationships. This idea that I don't need a relationship with my brother, I don't need, you know, this modern psychology where people are giving you permission to, you know, cut people out of your life, I don't think is a great idea. I don't know what you do with someone who's drinking themselves to death. You pray for them and love them and be with them on whatever basis you're able to be with them in whatever way that they allow you to be with them. I think if you show kindness and love and compassion, it works no matter what. Pass.
So in step 8, it asks us to make a list of everybody we've harmed. We want to make amends to your father. Your father's out drinking, using it, and on the street. You know, there's a piece in step 8 where it says we became willing to make amends. The minute I'm willing, I'm free. The rest is just a technicality. And I don't know when it happens. You know, it's in God's time that a lot of this shit happens. Do I trust that process? God is either everything or he's nothing unless I can't make amends to my dad. Are you willing to? You can be free and not make that approach by just being willing to make the approach in God's time.
And you could write a letter and share it with your sponsor. You could have that conversation with your sponsor. Put your dad in the empty chair and read the letter to your dad.
I think you answered this, Bob, with the last one, but I'm going to read it. My father is currently drinking and might die in doing so. How do I love him right where he is?
By loving him right where he is. And you will find that you love yourself more when you are able to do that.
Jack? This one's definitely for you. At times, living with an elder parent with dementia is painful. Especially when hoping they won't wake up in the morning. Can you suggest a way to deal with these shameful thoughts?
Acknowledge them. Had the thought. I've had the thought. I've had the thought it'd be easier if they just die together tonight in their sleep. I've had that thought. I'm not proud of it. You know. You know, we think we come in here, and there's a piece of me that thinks if I come in here and I do this shit, I'm going to rise above human being. I'm serious. You know, the cool thing is we become members of the human race. This is original equipment right here. You know, I wish I could control what goes on in here. But my attachment to what goes on in there is entirely different today than it was when I walked in the doors. Bob said it earlier, let the train go through the station. You don't have to get on every train that's in the station. You're going to have thoughts that aren't about who you are. They might be about who you were. You know, we're programmed. You know, that shit happens. I can't control it. But my attachment to it has changed dramatically, and I can have a thought like that and let it go through the station and know that it just was there. Let it pass on by. And share it with some of your running buddies. Share it with your sponsor.
Bob? Last question. Is it possible to forgive and not reconcile a relationship?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Forgiveness is not contingent. I mean, that's the great thing about most of the spiritual actions that we have to take in the program are not dependent on anybody else's behavior or interaction with us. And when it's equal and common, and it's wonderful. And yeah, no, it's your business. And when your heart changes, it's done. You're free. Could I have a show of hands of the people that like my talks better than Jack's?
About 25% there, Bob.
That's good. Thanks, guys. I was wondering. Bob's just more spiritually fit, so he asked for a show of hands.
Jack, does forgiveness always lead to reconciliation?
No. I have that one sister. I have 4 sisters. And I have a sister that if you watched us today, if you watched us Wednesday night before I left, you would think we get along well. And we don't. She doesn't like me most of the time. She has said things to me that are brutal. And today we have a common ground and interest in my parents. So we didn't even form it. This truce happened. And we can work together in the spirit and interest of my parents' well-being. I don't know. I've made amends to her. We have had a tumultuous relationship at best. I can go on about it, but I'm not going to because this is being recorded out of respect for her. She's a good person. We don't see, it's just been hard. It's been a tough relationship our whole life. And I have forgiven her. She has done things to my family and my kids and myself that if you would have told me before I walked in the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous and had the experience I've had here, that if somebody was going to do that to my kids, it would be unforgivable. And I have forgiven her 100%. I'm all in. You know, but just because that place of forgiveness comes doesn't mean I condone the behavior. I'm so hesitant to give forgiveness because I think it means I condone the behavior. I don't. But I'm not God. I can't sit in judgment any longer. And forgiveness is that way, you know, and it has. There's been obviously some sort of healing in that forgiveness process because we have this thing, we can work together on some things. We're not going to lunch anytime soon, and that's okay.
Thanks, guys. 5:30 for those of you, I know everyone's hungry. 5:30, dinner, and then be back here at 6:45 where Jules will tell his story. So get on your feet and give an applause.
So when are the workshops, tomorrow?